Welcome, everybody, back to Veil of Sound. And I'm very, very happy to have one of those people here on the show with me today that could be called hardcore hopefuls. I'm very happy to have Liam from Hidden Mothers here on the show with us today. So, Liam, thanks for joining.
No, thank you for having me. Yeah, looking forward to having a chat with you.
Yeah, it's our pleasure. And first question is usually what kind of band, merch, shirt, vinyl, cassette, whatever thing is it that you might have for us today? While you are thinking, I'll present my band shirt of the day. The Mighty Orange County Heroes from Thrice. And I'll say why I am wearing a Thrice shirt in a moment. Liam, what have you got for us?
Well, I'm wearing a Bastard Fest t-shirt, which was the event that we played earlier this year with Empire State Bastards, which is Simon from Biffy Clyro and Dave Lombardo from Slayer and Mike Venart from Ocean Sizes project. So it was us and Conjurer and Harriet and Pupil Slicer and Empire State Bastard, and it was nuts. But I mean, in terms of stuff I want to plug, please pre-order our album. That's the main thing that I've got going on at the minute.
Yeah, that is very good. The album, which will be out on November 29th via Church Road Records. I have to ask that, how does it feel now having a record coming out? Or no, let's put it like that. How does it feel to now have as many singles out for the new record as you have published songs completely before? I think you had like 4 or 5 songs before out on the web, and now it's already 3 singles. How does that feel?
It feels pretty great. Yeah, I mean, we had a 1 single that we debuted with way back in 2019, and then we had a 3-track EP. But then we have very much been writing those 4 songs for 4 years, and various reasons that I'm sure we'll get onto as we go along. But it feels fantastic. Like, particularly back in August when we released Defanged as the first single from the album, it just felt like a real sort of weight off our shoulders to finally start chapter 2 and really kind of get the ball rolling again and get that momentum going again. And yeah, it's exciting to have new music out after such a long period with nothing.
Is it just my imagination, or is Defanged also some kind of transitional song leading from the first phase of Hidden Mothers into the second one?
That definitely wasn't intentional when we wrote the song, but it certainly, when we were trying to work out, well, these are the 3 songs we want to release as singles, which order shall we release them in? Defanged felt like you say, like a transition, like a bridge between old and new. You know, it's certainly the closest song on the record to our previous material, although I do think it is still quite different to what we've done before. But it's certainly less of a departure from a lot of the other stuff on the record. So yeah, not an intentional thing. Like, we certainly didn't set out to write a transitional song, but it certainly feels that way now that it's out there.
Yeah, it feels like a good hinge, right, between both periods.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's step back into those first years of Hidden Mother. Would you say that back then, you were a post-black metal band or a black gaze band?
I have never truly understood the difference between the two. But I would probably argue that we were probably more of a post-black metal band, because I feel like black gaze suggests more of a sort of lo-fi, fuzzy, kind of blown out thing, like, you know, like Death Heaven, Sunbather, or like Sadness or something like that.
It's more shoegaze.
It's more heavy on the shoegaze, and obviously we had elements of that, but we were a lot more metallic and a lot riffier. And I think we probably were closer to something like Moll, or, you know, maybe Alcest even, or something like that, than we were to the really shoegaze heavy stuff, which I consider to be black gaze.
Yeah, I think like Moll, Svalbard, that would be the bands that I would have compared you to. Now, coming to the new record, coming to the new 10 tracks, would you agree? I mean, I'm Atrax, I'm very sure that you never set out to write a certain genre record, but would you be happy if one summarized it under post-hardcore?
Yeah, I don't think there's any denying that it's a post-hardcore record, and I think that what really happened was when we first started the band, we set out very intentionally to be a post-black metal band. We were like, right, this is the list of bands that we want to kind of draw from. Oathbreaker, Alcest, Death Heaven, that kind of thing.
Also something like Amen-Ra, or was that already To Do Me?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like Amen-Ra and Cult of Luna and, all that stuff is definitely in there. But we kept our pool of kind of our frame of reference quite narrow in the early days because we wanted to try and capture a very specific sound. But once we'd done that and once we'd done the EP, we kind of let the shackles off a little bit, and we were just like, well, let's just write and see what happens. And naturally we kind of deep towards more post-hardcore kind of sound.
Yeah. And now we come to my idea. I mean, like, I chose that shirt specifically for this interview. I think the longer we get into the record, the more it reminds me of bands like, at first, Touche Amore, and then the later we get into it, the more it sounds like Thrice. Are those two bands of which you say, okay, yeah, that's definitely stuff that we can all agree on?
Yeah. I mean, Thrice in particular is Luke's favorite band, and Luke is our lead songwriter. So that was always going to find its way into what we do, and there was a little bit of that in the early material. We on Beneath to the Earth off of the first EP, we had some like Thrice-esque vocals and stuff in there, but we've definitely leaned on that stuff a little bit more now. Touche is another band that we love, and that whole scene of like kind of ramshackle emotional post-hardcore, like La Dispute and Pianos Become the Teeth and Defeater and bands like that we all love as well. So that stuff has also found its way in.
You have mentioned that you some kind of like gave yourself a list of bands that you were referencing before, that you set out not to emulate but that you liked. Was that list also a summary of the people in the band?
More or less, yeah. I think that, we all liked all sorts of different things, but it was more very specifically that was the kind of thing that we just wanted to have a go at the time. None of us had ever, Adam had never been in a band before, full stop. And like, Ari, Luke, and myself had never really done anything in that arena. Steph, our original vocalist, the band he was in before, was probably the closest thing that any of us had done to like a black metal adjacent project. But yeah, it was definitely it was a starting point. It was a jumping off point, and it gave us the opportunity to come together and get to know each other as musicians and get used to playing together. And then over time, that the box that we put around ourselves to start off with sort of just fell away, and we started bringing all of our other influences into the pool of what we do. Because none of us really listen to that much black metal, or certainly not any sort of straight up black metal. We obviously love like the more experimental and the more weird and wonderful bands. But yeah, it was not a conscious effort to do something different, but more a subconscious, why are we putting these restrictions on ourselves? We don't need to limit ourselves to the constraints of this genre that we've chosen to exist within. Let's just write and see what happens. And it turns out that we're far more in tune with maybe the more sort of post-hardcore, screamo, post-metal than we are with black metal. Not that there's not still black metal in there, because there is, but it's a bit more textural now, a bit more of a component rather than being the whole thing.
Yeah. I can imagine that. And was this discovering that the box you've put yourself in was too narrow? Was that also, and now we come to one of the core questions that, of course, a lot of people will ask, was that also one of the reasons why you changed lineup?
Not really, no. I think that the lineup change had been coming for a little while. It was really more just like, over time, the relationship that was there just sort of grew apart, and from the creative standpoint, we weren't all kind of singing from the same hymn sheet anymore. It wasn't that, like, Steph just wanted to do black metal and that was that. But as we kind of started writing more and more, it became more and more apparent that there was a bit of a divide, I guess. But not in we don't get on anymore, or we don't like each other anymore kind of thing. It was more just, his heart wasn't in it as much as it was when we started, and we still wanted to keep experimenting with different things, and it just got to a point where we sat down and had that conversation, like, is this still working? Is this still what we want? Is it still what you want? And the answer that we all came to mutually was no. So no, it certainly wasn't, we've gone too far away from the genre that we wanted to do or anything like that. It was just one of those things, really. Just fizzled out like a lot of relationships do. And we talked for a little while, like, what do we do next? Do we get someone else in, or do we try and carry on as a 4-piece? And ultimately, that's what we decided to do. And I think that it's freed us up to take some more risks now that we don't have a standalone vocalist whose job is just to scream. We can do an instrumental song. We could do a song with no harsh vocals in it. Yeah. We can do whatever we want, really, because that pillar isn't there anymore.
Yeah, and I think it is very important to note here for everybody that is that one word that Liam just used. It's mutual. It's not as if anybody was kicked out of a band. It's not as if anybody screamingly closed the door. It sometimes just doesn't work out. However, what we have to say, I'm very sure you will not only play the 8 new tracks on your upcoming shows, but you will also play some of the older stuff. How will you do that then?
Well, to be honest, we probably won't. For the time being, we want to focus on the new material and focus on this chapter of the band and because we've been working on these new songs for the best part of 4 years, and the old songs were written 5, almost 6 years ago. And not that I still love those songs. I listened to that EP a couple of weeks ago and I was still so proud of it and grateful to have been part of it. But I think at the moment we want to draw a line and move forward. That's not to say that we would never play those songs again, because at some point in the future we might. And I would probably do what would have been Steph's vocals in those parts. My camera's just gone off. There we go. I would probably.
You've gone to a dark place. It's like.
Yes, I'm back. If we did those songs in the future, then I'm sure we could manage, because we've got people within the band capable of doing that kind of vocal. But yeah, for 2025 at least, I think that we will be sticking to the new material and focusing on that.
Then, of course, the question has to be: will you play the stuff front to back?
Maybe, maybe not. I mean,
of course, it also depends on the time slot you get. But if you have enough time to do all 8 tracks, would you then play it in the same track listing?
I think if we had enough time, like if we had like an hour-long, headline set, I think we probably would. Yeah, I mean, we actually did earlier this year as a bit of a test run. We did a show in Sheffield where we did the album in full. It was a little bit trickier than we thought it was going to be, to be honest, because some of the way that we have the set now, the set that we're currently playing, it's 6 of the 8 songs basically is what we're doing at the moment.
Yeah.
And they're not quite in the order that they are on the record because we've got some really nice transitions figured out to make the set flow really nicely. Whereas when we did the album set, for some reason that wasn't quite as straightforward, and it did feel a little bit stop-start. So I think we would only do the album set front to back if we felt like we could do it in a way that did it justice, and that that we were happy with, and that we felt was representative of the quality of the record. But the way that we have the set at the moment, although it is slightly out of order from the album, it flows really nicely. So yeah, that's what we'll be doing for the first half of first few shows of 2025 at least, is doing what we've got set out at the moment.
What I really like about the record, and that is surely intentional, is its progression from Defanged up to Haze at the end. I don't want to say that it becomes calmer and calmer, but it becomes a little bit more ambient, a little bit more relying on atmospheres, a lot of textures. And what struck me, that if anybody asked me, like, okay, how would you describe the sound of a new record? I would say, it's very earthy.
I'll take that.
Who came up with the sound, with the tuning? Was that you, or was that horrible producer that you had?
Oh no, Joe, he's the best. We've always, tuning wise, we've always played in drop C, so we've always had a bit of a sort of density to what we do. Atmosphere is something that we're very big on. Ari, our guitarist in particular, Luke writes the bulk of the songs, but then Ari is all about texture. So he's the one adding all these different layers of reverb and different kind of textural elements that just make the whole thing kind of feel more spacious rather than kind of angular and riffy. Which we're not afraid to get angular and riffy, because there's
Defanged
stuff like
shows that surely.
Yeah, and Death Curl on the record as well, some big riffs in that, and The Grey as well is another really heavy one on the record, kind of in the centerpiece of the record. But yeah, I think that what I really love is that Defanged, obviously, it starts really heavy, like blast beats, tremolo guitar, like, it kicks off, no warning, no preamble, just kind of cracks on. And then
I bet a lot of people will have the same experience as I did. I put it on and I was like, wait, there must be something missing. And I started it again, and it was the same. And I was, start again.
Yep, just no warning.
That is and I bet that is the opener of your concerts, isn't it?
It is at the minute, yeah.
It's perfect. It's perfect. It fits.
I don't know what other song we would open the set with, to be honest, because it just works so well. And we've been closing the set with Haze as well, because that big atmospheric slow ending.
Yep.
Just I think that the reason that I love the way the record is laid out so much is because we've basically sandwiched the record between two very different kinds of heaviness. One sort of blasting, blaring, fast, horrible start, and then a huge kind of crushing, slow, spacious, but still kind of cosmically heavy ending. I like the fact that we've managed to do both of those things, and we've used those two things to bookmark the record. And I like to think that between those two, the start and the end of the record, we do most of the other kinds of heaviness as well. But it's the layout of the record and the order of the tracks and everything was something that we've put a lot of thought into, because we want people to experience it as a single piece of work, as much as we want people to check out the singles and add us to your playlists and whatever else. The true strength of the record, I think, is as a whole, and I hope that people can get on board with that.
Yeah, and before anybody thinks like, who are we talking about when we mention producer. We're talking about none other than Joe Clayton from Pine, who released a wonderful record earlier this year. If you want to know a little bit more about the record, about his own label, Floodlit Recordings, and why he's basically very close to being a prisoner, check the interview that we did. I think it was July or something like that. Wonderful guy, really wonderful guy.
Yeah. He's just really good at getting the best out of you. And there's a few moments on the record that wouldn't have existed without him, because he's just very good at going, yeah, I like that, but you consider doing this. And he's almost always right. So yeah, there's definitely a touch of Joe's musical kind of songwriting knowledge in there as much as there is his production skill.
Yeah, I figure the one thing that I've heard quite a few times by now about him producing a record is just what you said. It's not just simply I like that, but it's always, I like that, but try this one. It's always like giving you an alternative. And I think that's something that he's pretty good at.
Yeah, in Defanged, obviously the first 2/3 of that song are harsh vocals, like scream vocals, and then the final third of the record is melodic vocals. But of the song, rather. Originally, it was going to be all screaming from start to finish. There was going to be no clean vocals in that song, bar like one line. But then Joe just kind of sat us down and he was like, this feels like a lot of the same thing in this song. And I think if you added a clean vocal section, it would really elevate it, and it would make the heavy vocals have more impact because there'd be something to contrast them against. And we're like, oh, okay, yeah. And then we tried it, and we're like, oh shit, yeah, you're right. So that's one example of him just kind of knowing what you haven't been able to see because you're too close to the song to see what it needs sometimes.
Yeah, there's not enough distance then, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you can't see the forest for the trees.
Oh, you have the same metaphor in England than we have in Germany. I never thought about it that way. Yeah, it's definitely true. I have a few more questions before we come to the quickfire round at the end. And one of them is, of course, you only had 4 tracks, but you had a really good run of building some kind of reputation with those few tracks. You've done a lot of gigs. You basically played all over the UK, more or less, especially, of course, the English and Welsh part. How do you feel now? Is the next step going to be more headliner shows? More non-supports, more festivals?
I think I'd like to keep doing, for me personally, I would like to keep doing a healthy mix of all of the above. We've got a short headline run in February, where we're doing a couple of places we've never been before. So we're going to Liverpool and Newcastle, as part of that, as well
Europe.
Well, we do need to go to Europe, yeah, but I don't know how to make that happen. So here's the problem: is that
the problem is you're living on the island of idiots.
Well, yeah, the island of idiots that has decided to isolate itself even more than it already was. Yeah, but it's also, even if that wasn't the case, I know it's difficult. I know the UK scene pretty well, and I know my way around it, and I book all of our shows. So I am effectively our touring agent and our manager and everything else. But Europe, I've got no experience with. So I think when it comes to that, we're going to have to probably get someone in to help us organize that. But it will happen. It will happen. It absolutely will happen. I just don't know when. But, to answer your question, we want to do a bit of everything. So we've got headline shows booked for next year. We've got festivals booked for next year. We're doing Reality Unfolds. We're doing Noise Fest. By the time this interview goes out, actually, it will have been announced that we're playing Strange Forms next year as well.
Be careful. We're recording October 30 and it will come out November 3rd.
That's fine because it's being announced on November 2nd. So we're doing Strange Forms, but the big one next year is 2000 Trees, because we're, to be on a poster with bands like Alexis on Fire and Coheed and Cambria and
don't go too far into that one. I took that poster and one of your comments as one of the basis for my quickfire round question. Don't worry.
Okay, I'm gonna go with it. I won't go into anymore. But I mean, the festivals we've got lined up look great. The headline shows we've got lined up look great. We are coming to Scotland for the first time in the new year. That won't get announced for a little while yet, but it is happening. We just do a bit of everything. But I feel like I like supporting other people as well. And if any bands want us to support them, I'm always open to the conversation.
There are two questions that stem from that answer for me. But first off, you've been speaking about supporting. Is that maybe one of the strongholds and one of the biggest pillars of the very thriving UK scene at the moment, that most of the bands don't have an ego and don't have any kind of fear of supporting each other?
Yeah, I think that's a huge part of it. I mean, the UK scene, in my opinion, is the healthiest it's been since I've known it.
Maybe because of Brexit.
Maybe. I mean, there is maybe something to be said for having no choice but to do more UK shows and get around the UK a bit more. I'm sure the bands would still prefer it was the other way, but that change hadn't happened. But you have to make the best of a bad situation. Yeah, potentially. But I just think it's healthier as well in terms of the quality of the bands, and not just the quality of the bands, but also the variety of the bands. When I first started kind of touring in around 2007, 2008, a lot of the bands, the UK scene was there was maybe one or two different kinds of band. There was the sort of, under oath kind of post-hardcore haircut emo bands. There was like Bring Me the Horizon, much it, bar the odd exception. And every single show we played was with a band that sounded like one of those two things. But now, I mean, look at our scene. We have a band, look at Just Church Road Records. We have like us doing what we do, Underdark doing like, almost straight up black metal, Lowen doing like Middle Eastern experimental metal, and then like Blanket, who are doing like 90s indie rock meets Cave-In meets Deftones, and then Iris doing like shoegazy metal, and even with Just Church Road as like a snapshot, it just shows you how much variety there is in the UK scene at the minute, and I think that's what makes it truly healthy, in my opinion.
I would totally agree with that. And I also think that Church Road taking over a position that Holy Roar had before and being headed by a woman, I think that's an important thing.
Oh, absolutely. I think that they, Sammy and Justine,
I was just interrupted by my dog. You go ahead.
So Sammy and Justine, I think, have always been tastemakers, whether they like it or not. People trust their opinion on music, and so Church Road naturally is the same stamp of quality that Holy Roar was before, obviously, all that stuff happened. But it used to be that you saw that weird little baby logo on a CD, and you knew that whatever it was going to be fantastic. And I think the same can be said now for Church Road, where if that label is putting a band out, it's because that band has a great record. And hopefully people will agree when our album comes out. That is yet to be seen.
I'm pretty sure they will.
Well, I mean, the thing is, it's nice to be humble, but at the same time, if I didn't think it was a great record, I wouldn't have put it out. So I hope that other people agree.
But then you can also take that one sentence that you basically already said about other bands. You can take that too hard for yourself. If somebody like Church Road puts your record out, that means something. Definitely means something. So you can also be proud of that.
Yeah, they wouldn't have put it out if they didn't believe in it. So
no matter how nice the guys in a band are, if the music isn't good, I think the people behind Church Road know that every record in a way has to sell, because if it doesn't sell enough, we might not make another one. Like that's always a thing with
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
I have one more question, and basically it's two in one, but I'll get to the first one. Okay. You as a band have had a certain liking for the color pink. You had pink shirts. Sometimes your logo has been not white on black, but pink on other textures. And now we have a certain reddish, pinkish glow. For people watching this, you see it behind Liam. That is basically part of a detailed part of a new record cover. That is not an incident, right?
I mean, we've certainly never sat down and had a conversation about like branding. Pink is not our color. In the same way that, like, for example, Ithaca, R.I.P. Yeah. By the way, that news came out today. That's a horrible thing to find out. But they leaned so hard. They leaned so hard on orange for the release of They Fear Us, and like. Yeah. We certainly didn't go, well, let's just do that, but with pink. But it seems to be that we've ended up doing it accidentally anyway. I don't know. I just think it's a nice color, and it pops out on when you see a lot of bands that only deal in black and white. It stands out a little bit more, especially on a merch wall at a festival.
I bet. And the question connected to that, we all know the inclusive character of the color pink. It speaks to a lot of people from the LGBTQIA+. I hope I got all the letters. If I didn't, then I'm very, very sorry. I did not mean to forget anybody, but it's a very, very inclusive color, meaning a lot to people from minorities. Would you consider your own band an inclusive band?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we're not none of us are part of that community. So it would be, what's the word I'm looking for? Sort of inauthentic for us to be like, yeah, we did it for the gays, because that's not what happened. But at the same time, yeah, of course, like we're an open-minded, left-wing, inclusive band. We want people of all colors, creeds, and beliefs, and sexual orientations, and everything else to be able to come to us and feel safe with us and enjoy our music in the way it was intended. And we also don't want anybody who doesn't think those people should be able to enjoy music anywhere near us or anywhere near our shows. So, whilst we're not an outwardly political band in the way that some other bands are, those are beliefs that we hold dear to ourselves and would want to be reflected in our public persona and our private personas. Yes. I suppose the answer to the question is yes, in a long-winded way.
Yeah. And I'm also very, very sure that is one of the other pillars of Church Road Records. Not only for the history of Holy Raw, but also for the people who run Church Road. I'm very, very sure that is another pillar. If your music probably, again, can be Alcest-like, if you don't feel that, very sure they won't put it out, which is also, again, a very, very good thing for the scene.
And I think the scene at the moment, there's so many, again, it's more varied than I've ever known it, but it's also more varied in terms of the people involved in making the music. There's so many of the important bands in our UK scene at the moment are, fronted by women or fronted by trans people or fronted by people of color, not even just necessarily fronted, but, have those people contained within their ranks. Yeah. And I think that is I think it's very easy to say, oh, well, that doesn't matter. I just like the music. But, the different experiences of different kinds of people makes that music and makes for a more interesting melting pot of ideas. Like, look at Lowen as an example. So, like, Nina from Lowen is Middle Eastern, and so much of that influence from her, her upbringing and her culture and her, her heritage is in her voice, and that band with some, a white girl who can sing would probably not be anywhere near as interesting without her input and her kind of ideas and her different take on things. And I think that you can apply that to anyone from any minority who makes art is going to have their life experience imprinted on the art that they make, and that makes for more interesting art, in my opinion. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, the closest thing we have to that in Hidden Mothers is Aryan, who is also of Middle Eastern heritage, although he would say that he's probably the whitest Middle Eastern man you'd ever meet. But he, I'm sure his heritage and culture still finds its way into what he brings to the band one way or another.
Sure. One more question before the infamous quickfire round. How did your friends in The Grey react when you wrote a song about them?
Well, I didn't even think of that when we called that song The Grey, but Andy from The Grey was very quick to pick up on that when he saw, because I think that song is obviously not out there in the wider world yet. But I think I did post a photograph of the finished kind of studio whiteboard with all the song names on, with all the parts ticked off, and the Grey was on there, and I think Andy did make some sort of snarky comment. But I'm sure if they want to use that to try and piggyback off a bit of free publicity, they're more than welcome to it. It's all about lifting each other up.
Yeah. So now we're nearly at the end. First of all, thanks for all the insight into the new record. First, for all the details. Also, thank you for your patience with my shitty internet connection at the moment. But nobody leaves our interviews without have to face the infamous quickfire round. Neither do you. You will always get two alternatives. Have to choose one of them and may give a short explanation for your choice. We'll start off with a little bit of post-Black. Which band would you rather listen to at the moment? Wolves in the Throne Room or Alcest?
Alcest, for me. I particularly have enjoyed Alcest more in their later years when they've gone a bit more heavy on the sort of dream pop and shoegaze elements that they do. Not the most recent album, although the most recent album is great, but the one before that, the one with
Spiritual Surrender
on the front. Yes, Spiritual Instinct is that album is spectacular. Yeah, I love that record. So I love Wolves in the Throne Room as well, but if I had to choose between the two, I would choose Alcest.
And you will see that I leaned a little bit on the post-hardcore thing here. Glassjaw versus Let Live.
Glassjaw.
Because of a vocalist?
Probably just because I'm a bit older, and Glassjaw was one of my like gateway post-hardcore bands. Like those first two records are some problematic lyrics on that first one now, with hindsight. But at the time, great record, loved it. Worship and Tribute, I think, is one of the most perfect post-hardcore records ever made. I do love Let Live, but I think the last record before they split up was a bit of a non-starter for me, and I hated Fever 333. But I know that's a different band, but it really just kind of soured me on
but Jason sounds like a sponge version of what he was before on Fever 33.
But no.
Again, post-hardcore. From Autumn to Ashes versus From First to Last.
Okay, so that's two bands that I definitely did like when I was younger.
I thought so.
But they were definitely more peripheral bands rather than like main bands. I think I would probably enjoy listening to From Autumn to Ashes more now than From First to Last. Although that Ride the Wings of Pestilence by From First to Last is a banger. But if gun to my head, From Autumn to Ashes.
Yeah, and I mean, like, of course, we have to say that out of those two bands, the guy who made it most was in From First to Last. I mean, like,
Skrillex. He's Skrillex now, which is still nuts to me, even though, like, but I think that From First to Last album, Dear Diary, my Teen Angst Has a Body Count or whatever is
it's something
really
like that.
record.
Yeah.
And he's got a great voice. Like he's got a hell of a range. He's just very high pitched, and I don't like that so much anymore.
One of those questions that many people nowadays considered, it's like the Stones versus the Beatles. Mars Volta versus At the Drive-In. And not just one record, the complete oeuvre.
Okay, so in that case, I would probably say the Mars Volta, because the Mars Volta has, in my opinion, 2 10 out of 10 albums, whereas At the Drive-In only has 1. So I guess I would have to give it to the Mars Volta, because I think Deloused in the Comatorium and Francis the Mute are both perfect records. And after that, they got
so happy to have both as a first edition downstairs.
Oh, I bet.
That's like a little car and 2 records.
Yeah. After that, I was less interested in what they did. I think, though, Relationship of Command is my favorite record from either of those bands. But I don't care too much about anything else they did.
For me, the way is that I gotten to know At the Drive-In before Relationship of Command. So I already knew In Casino Out and some other stuff. For me, it's very hard to argue on both bands. My only reason for choosing At the Drive-In would be that the drop-off between the first body of work and the latest record is not as big in At the Drive-In as it is with Mars Volta. I hate the last Mars Volta album. For me, it's like shit put into a gold wrapping, like.
Yeah, I didn't like it either, because this is a really weird question, but do you have Nando's in Germany?
We have something like Nando's, but we don't have Nando's, no.
Right, okay. Well, in Nando's, they always play like sort of half-assed flamenco music in the background while you're eating. And the last Mars Volta album just made me feel like I was in Nando's. So it's not for me. But I do think those first 2 records are incredible.
Yeah. I mean, like, I would even go so far and give Delirium a 12 out of 10, because that is a perfect record. I mean, the narrative behind it, the legends around the record, the loss of a person basically working on it, having Flea step in, all those stories around Delirium are just awesome.
I think the Mars Volta are a more interesting band, that's for sure. Even if you don't love everything
that is definitely
that they've done. Yeah.
2 seminal post-hardcore bands from across the pond. Alexis on Fire versus Finch.
Alexis on Fire.
I thought so.
No question in my mind. Although I will say that Finch had 1 massive record. And
What It Is to Burn.
What It Is to Burn. And then they followed that up with one of the most interesting and original post-hardcore records I can remember. And nobody gave a shit about it. Yeah. And it was a real crime, because that second Finch album is fantastic, but it just didn't catch on, which is a real shame. But I think Alexis on Fire are maybe the most consistent band from that whole scene. I think everything they've put out has been really solid. In particular, for me, I think Crisis and Old Crows, Young Cardinals are both incredible records. But the new one was really good as well. Otherness I really enjoyed, and I'm very excited about seeing them on the same day as us at 2003 next year.
I know. See, that's where I got it from. And I have to say, for anybody who wants to know the formula for Alexis on Fire, in an interview shortly after the millennium, they stated a German band as one of their influences. Everybody check out Waterdown, especially their one record on Victory Records, Never Kill the Boy on the First Date.
On the first date,
you'll see where Alexis on Fire got their inspiration from. And they were even on a German label with our first 2 records. So
I saw Waterdown open for someone at the London Astoria, and I can't remember for the life of me who it was, but they were fantastic. Yeah, they were a great band. Yeah, that's really taken me back to 20 years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. Well. And, using Alexis on Fire as a little springboard, ding, 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 ding. Gallows, with Frank or with Wade?
This is probably my hottest take, but I prefer Wade. I think that...
Well, you cannot be right about everything.
Frank's a better frontman, but Wade is a better vocalist.
But Great Britain is the best album.
I never got on with it. I liked Orchestra of Wolves, and then Great Britain, I was like, nah, I don't really see what all the fuss is about. My favorite Gallows record is the self-titled, the first one that Wade did.
Yeah.
I think that's got something like Outside Iraq, Cross of Lorraine, Last June, Odessa. Those are all bangers. I love that record.
I still remember when I started being a teacher, and I did a little club on lyrics and stuff, and something outside of regular school lessons. I used Orchestra of Wolves as one of the examples for modern punk music. And I still remember that a few weeks after that, I walked across the school hall and I saw a student basically just humming, "My name is Casanova." That was one of those moments that I still consider the best moments of being a teacher.
You should be proud of that. Although there's a line in that song that, with today's glasses on, it's a bit.
Yeah, but I taught that 50 years ago.
Oh yeah, it was dodgy then. It's dodgier now.
Yeah, much dodgier now.
Yeah.
And now we come to the 2 bands that I have already hinted at a lot in this interview. Let's start with Touche Amore. I'll give you 2 records: Stage 4 versus Parting the Seas Between Brightness and Me.
Oh God, those are the 2 hardest ones you could have said, because...
Oh, wait for the last one.
Okay. Parting the Sea, I love because it was the one that I got into them on. And it just... I know every word to that record. It's so etched into my brain that, if somebody, these things you always see, oh, someone's got a gun to your head and they've said, recite the lyric to a full album or they'll shoot you.
Yeah.
I could do that album, I'm sure of it. But Stage 4 is a masterpiece. It's so... I don't know if I've ever heard a more moving record that upsets me so much, even though I can't relate to anything that it's about. Because it's all about his mum dying from cancer and being away from all that. And, I've never had to go through any of that, but it still hits me like a fucking truck every time I listen to it. And I think that is testament to how well written that album is. So I think the diplomatic answer is Stage 4 is the better record, but Parting the Sea is my favorite.
Yeah. From a musical standpoint, it has to be Stage 4. It has to be Parting the Seas. And I'm still very, very happy that my daughter can sing the first half or scream the first half of Tilde, of the opening track of Parting the Seas. For exactly the reasons that you've explained, Stage 4 is my answer, because Benediction is a song that I've listened to over the last 12 months, I would say 1,000 times, because it's so fucking true. And it's the album is basically, for me, the record that at least gave me a little bit of hope when Mom died last year. And it's exactly that. I've spoken to Jeremy about it. That record is telling me that somebody else had to go through the same stuff that I did. Yeah. So from personal reason, for me, it's Stage 4, but musically, of course, it's Parting the Seas.
Yeah,
And
I think
now
I love them both for different reasons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There is no Touche album that I couldn't recite from front to back.
Yeah.
And that is a hard thing to say because listening to so much stuff, like being able to say every word to a record, that is hard for someone.
I think it helps that his like tone and delivery is so like conversational almost that it's very easy to get those lines just lodged in your head because it feels like he's speaking them to you directly. I think
and even when he screams, he's so clear. I'm like, that's awesome. And now the big one, the one that I've been waiting for, the Veishu versus the Artist in the Ambulance.
The Artist in the Ambulance. Only because, so if Luke was doing this interview instead of me, you could have a really long conversation about Thrice. You could probably speak to him for hours about Thrice.
I wouldn't have noticed Thrice on your record.
No, I do like Thrice, but I do have a bit of a blind spot in the middle of their career. So I loved, what's it called? The Illusion of Safety. And I loved The Artist in the Ambulance. And then I checked out for a little while. And the album that I went back to them on was To Be Everywhere Is To Be Nowhere from
the comeback record.
The comeback record. So I've got a big hole in my Thrice knowledge for like 4 or 5 albums. So I'm going to have to say The Artist in the Ambulance because I don't know Vehisu enough to make a call on it. But I know Luke will slaughter me for that answer. But Artist in the Ambulance.
Well, your band has already gone through one lineup change. Another guitarist can't be that hard to find.
It'll be me that goes, not him.
Yeah, that's what I meant. Like you're going, man. Like yeah. So, Liam, first of all, thanks for all the insight into the new record. Thanks for the detailed answers to the quickfire round. But you're the first one to ask because we're closing in on Christmas. Favorite Christmas track? Oh, and if you say Last Christmas, this interview will not be published.
It's not Last Christmas. Favorite Christmas song? I mean, I have a bit of a built-in dislike of Christmas music in general from working in retail so much as a youth and having to hear the same 10 or 11 songs just on repeat all the time.
Mariah Carey and Michael Bublé.
Yeah, but like I love Fairy Tale of New York. I know it's cliche, but I think it's a really well written song. I love The Darkness. Don't Let the Bells End is a great one as well because it's just fucking stupid. So yeah, I would probably have to say Fairy Tale of New York if I had to pick one, but I do love both of those two.
For everybody who wants to find out what my favorite track of the last 10, 15, 20 years is, Christmas Eve. I will ask everybody up to then about theirs, and I will disclose mine on Christmas Eve. So maybe that's a little incitement to listen to that one. And I can already tell you that the interview on Christmas Eve is going to be a really good one. So, Liam, thanks for all your time. And I know that you need a little bit of rest before you pick up the boy. So, do that. Talk to you in a bit. And all the best with the new record. Out November 29th on Church Road Record, Erosion Avulsion. Wonderful, great post-hardcore record. Thanks for your time, my friend.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Bye-bye.